Thanks for having me here today. And I'm going to be talking through human factors usability engineering perspectives from my focus and my experience. So we'll be US FDA centric, but I wanted to talk you through some perspectives. So let's get started. I'll do a quick introduction, and then I want to explore industry and FDA perspectives, and we'll end on a few human factors trends. So let's get rolling. So hello, everybody. I am Shannon Hosty, and I am the Chief Scientific Officer for Pathway for Patient Health, and I am also a Senior Principal Engineer at Chymanox, working with clients in product development. I have over 25 years of experience. I started in the mid-90s working in medical device and combination product development, working in systems engineering, quality engineering, and human factors. I'll tell you a little bit more about that journey as we go. I have also, along that journey, had an opportunity to serve within the FDA. I worked as a human factors team lead within CDRH on the device side, and also worked over in DMEPA, which is under CDER on the drug side. DMEPA, in addition to other things, reviews human factors submissions for drugs, biologics, and combination products. So let's dive in and we'll go through. At Chymanox, I have an opportunity to work with an excellent human factors team. Just to give a little bit of background on Chymanox, the name Chymanox means ideal knowledge transfer, and our why, our vision is that we do what we do because patients deserve better. And so we do that by accelerating design and development and working to bring safe and effective products to market and support clients in doing such. We do that through many different service offerings and expertise background areas. Chymanox does much of what would be needed for a medical device or a pharmaceutical client, with the exception of clinical studies and manufacturing. We support manufacturing, but we don't do manufacturing. But today we're here to talk about human factors specifically. So let's dive into my slice of this pie, which is the human factors. I have to brag on my team a little bit. I have an excellent group of folks that we work with on the human factors team. And within our team, we actually have myself and two others that formerly worked within the FDA. So we have Quinn Wynn, who worked within, she actually worked within both CDRH and DMEPA as well. And Rita Lynn, who worked within CDRH. But in the world of human factors, there's been a rapid evolution in the last 20 years, and it is continuing to evolve with some new questions. So let me take you through that journey a little bit here. So I'm going to start this discussion in 2000. Okay, so I'll go back 24 years at this point. And I want to give you a little perspective on my journey as well as we go through this, just to give a perspective of how someone can navigate this landscape, right? This landscape of evolving regulatory requirements. Right? So I started my journey, as I mentioned earlier, in the mid-90s, and I was working in combination products, and I was supporting some new product development, but also supporting field investigations for products coming back from the field. And I was working on injection devices. And some of these injection devices were coming back and they were fractured. So I was doing the analysis and I was trying to understand why they were fracturing. And I was hitting a lot of dead ends. The material properties shouldn't have been leading to this type of fracturing. The loads on the materials, nothing was indicative that would suggest some of these failure modes. And so ended up running a infrared spectroscopy scan on the surface where these fractures were taking place, and identified on these devices that fractured substances such as motor oil and butter. And So from an engineering standpoint, what happened was oils and plastics. Oils can cause plastics to embrittle, and so then much more prone to fracture. So my question then was, why is there lubricant on these injection devices? Explored that a little bit more. So the injection force itself, so the actual force to push down and do the injection, was low enough such that that shouldn't have been the issue. But what the issue turned out to be was that as you injected, the force was cyclical. So it was high, low, high, low, high, low. And so people said, oh, well, this needs to be lubricated so that it has a smooth injection force. And so they did that. And for me as an engineer, I was a little bit, I had to pause and understand, how do I understand what users need? How do I understand the risks associated with the product when it felt like people could do anything, right? So I went on a journey, personal journey of my own to better understand how people and technology interact. I discovered the field of cognitive systems engineering and learned along the way that, we do have a lot of data on human performance and how people make decisions, and that people behave rationally in the moment. So when people are making a choice, assuming no malicious intent, they are making that choice based on the information and the environment around them. And so understanding that can give you insights as to how to design to support that. So I went on the journey at that point. This was right around 2000, and discovered, it felt to me like opening of a window, right? That this was a lens we needed to think about when we were doing product development and product design for medical and for patients. I was not alone on that journey, and that's what I want to show you here. Around the same time in the US, the IOM report came out, Institute of Medicine report, To Err is Human. And they were identifying that medical error was one of the leading causes of death in the United States. Not tracked as such, so it doesn't show up on the stats boards, but when they broke it down and looked at it, they were identifying this. So this really caught the attention of the policymakers, the lawmakers within the US. They started to investigate this and started to drive the regulators to get a better understanding of this phenomenon. So that was happening in the background. That was happening at the FDA, and they were exploring this. The industry, we had various industry standards committees going, right? There was the IEC standards series, for electrical safety, that had usability considerations. That was evolving over this time. The AAMI committee within the US was working on HE 75, and that first published in 2009. And HE 75 is, if you're not familiar, is a very broad-based standard, use standard. It has process descriptions, but it also has a general library of information. So it's super helpful. Hopefully we'll be releasing an update soon from the 2009 version. But so this was released, and the FDA around the same time issued a draft guidance saying how they were planning to review human factors in pre-market submissions. So this got the ball rolling, right? Around the same time, early in 2015, I had an opportunity to join the FDA, so I transferred over and began to work there. Later that year, the standard was updated, the 62366-1. This was updated to be much more safety focused. About a month later, the FDA released the draft guide, or the final guidance for CDRH, and some draft guidances for combination products. And since then, we've had follow-on activities that are additional guidance documents being issued, different regulatory authorities issuing regulations and guidance around human factors, and standards that have also been now referencing the usability engineering standards, so such as aseptic presentation or the risk management standard, ISO 14971. And then in 2014, we are here at the Usability Evaluation Center and at this conference. So let's talk a little bit about this process that I've been mentioning. So if I had to sum human factors up in a single graphic, this is where I landed. So the discussion here is that a lot of people, when they get the request from a regulatory body about human factors data, they're thinking about the validation study. But the validation, it's not a test standard, it's a process standard. So the validation study is just the tip of that pyramid, and you really need to establish and identify all of the foundational information in order to properly design in use-related safety and then perform a validation study to support that conclusion. So again, looking and building that foundation from the bottom up, you're looking at starting in product development and your early research, identifying and learning as much as you can about your users, your user groups. What are your strategies for training? What are your strategies for product supply? Identifying those user needs and translation and design inputs, right? You're going to move into product development. You have labeling development, instructional materials, prototypes and testing, what we call generative or formative testing. So these are early on tests that you use to inform your user interface. And then moving into your final evaluations, maybe a final late stage formative and a summative study, or validation study. And so all of the recruitment management and things that go along with running a successful valid study. All of these are part of that human factors process, and evidence of all of this is what comes together to support the case that you have, in fact, designed your product to support safe and effective use. And then implementation as it carries on into your regulatory submissions globally and your post-market surveillance and so forth. All right. So wanted to dive in a little bit on perspectives. So as I mentioned, I had the opportunity to work both within industry and within a regulatory body. And I found this very interesting, the lens, the different lenses that you may have, whether you're on which side of the piece of that. So I want to start with a quick summary of FDA. This is CDRH's mission. And again, the excellent thing about working at the FDA was you're working with a very diverse, talented group of folks who are all working towards the mission of the agency. And it was an awesome experience from that standpoint. And so this mission is timely and continued access to safe and effective products, understandable and accessible science-based information, advancing regulatory science, providing the industry with predictable, consistent, transparent regulatory pathways. Okay, this is a great mission. It is also a tall order, right? This is a lot to do, and continue to deliver on this promise. What I found by looking at other regulatory bodies across the globe is that the missions of the regulatory bodies over medical devices all have a very similar mission, right? In South Korea, the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, their tagline is "Your safety is our standard," right? They're all focused on improving medical devices and patient health, right? And public safety. So just wanted to talk a little bit about my perspective. Again, I was in industry for about 18 years and came in as a pre-market reviewer. So coming into the agency as a pre-market reviewer, my role was to review medical devices, combination products that were being submitted for clearance or approval. So all of that data had to come together and support those decisions. A few epiphanies that happened to me along the way. One, I had been writing verification validation reports for many years at that point. Someone had read all of those. So I felt good about that. And so as you're writing these, someone is reading them and going over the data that you're capturing in these reports. And what I found when I was reviewing them that was different from when I was writing them was that when I was reviewing them, I felt like I could have blinders on. So I was just reviewing this data to say, okay, how does this support that conclusion, right? That it's substantially equivalent or that it's safe and effective, right? And when you're writing them within a project, within a company, right, you're writing that data down, but you have all sorts of other pressures going on, right? You have timelines, you have budgets, you have delays in testing because products weren't available and the tests got delayed. So there's all sorts of different pressures going on in capturing that information. But my advice is, when you're thinking about that, try to pause for a second and think about who's reviewing that data. So that could be your future self. That could be someone reviewing it along the line down the road when they're making product updates. That could be the regulatory reviewer that's looking at that data. So think a bit about your audience and try to block out some of the noise when you're capturing that information, because I think it will help make it a little more clear and concise. And I want to share with you a communication tool called 4-Part Harmony. And this is a tool that the FDA uses in writing efficiencies. I have a link here to their information on that. So the idea here is that as you're writing a deficiency, you want to make sure it has all of the information necessary. So you identify what was provided, you explain why that's deficient, and you explain what's needed and request what's needed. Explain why it's needed and request what's needed. So you provided your human factors study. However, you did not provide your use-related risk analysis. And without the use-related risk analysis, we can't appropriately assess what are the critical tasks of use. And so therefore, please provide a use-related risk analysis and explain how your validation study addresses that, for example. So the consideration in responding to that is think about 4-Part Harmony in the same way, because it's a pretty effective way to communicate. And so in response, that could be, okay, dear FDA, thank you for your review. You've requested an updated URA. We understand that you need this URA to understand the critical tasks of use. And here's the information, and provide that, or we've conducted this analysis and identified there are no critical tasks of use. Here's how we came to that conclusion. Whatever that response may be, providing that response, and then in the conclusion, basically say how this addresses their original request and seek confirmation. So just thinking through that 4-Part Harmony approach, there's different ways to apply it. This is just one example, as maybe a good way to communicate back and forth to the agency in this example. So sometimes it's difficult because you're sharing information back and forth and not able to sit down and have necessarily a conversation face to face. So something to consider. So I did return to industry, and part of that was because I really like diving into projects and working on the details. So I came back into industry, and I wanted to share some trends that we're seeing and some things that we continually, as a community, need to keep our eyes on. So part of that is that evaluation methods are still being defined, right? We have the human factors process to design the user interface of a product to support safe and effective use. But regulatory pathways vary, right? They vary within a country or within a region, and they vary from region to region, right? And so some of those regulatory questions can be difficult to answer with human factors data. One example of that is combination products that are biosimilars or for generics. So now I have a device component to a generic, and I need to show how it's the same. That could be difficult. That can be a challenge on the human factors side, on the usability side. So methods are still being defined for that. There's, within the US, there's ongoing research to support the FDA, and the FDA is funding it, to support how they're looking at that within the regulatory paradigm. Another trend or challenge that we're facing is global expansion of regulatory expectations. I'll say global evolution of regulatory expectations, right? This is ongoing. And staying on top of that and understanding what those requirements are within given regions to make sure as you're going along your product development or your product updates, you're capturing all of the information you need for the regions that you're going to. Right? And finally, another trend is that new technologies raise new questions of use-related risk. So some classic examples of this that we're facing right now are artificial intelligence, decision support systems, closed loop control systems. So as these are evolving and coming onto the market, how to demonstrate safe and effective use is something that has to evolve with that, right? So for example, with AI, there are questions around trust. Does the user appropriately trust the AI recommendation, or do they know when they should not trust that, when it may be getting to a point where it's brittle? And so different questions come in as these technologies evolve. And so we as human factors practitioners need to stay on top of that and make sure we're thinking about appropriate methods to evaluate that. So we have some work to do. And I am happy to have the new Usability Center there as another colleague in this space that we can continue and work to evolve and improve safety for patients around the world.